Okay, can you see the slide? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to put my glasses on so I can really see what I'm looking at too. So, welcome to Teaching Finger Symbol History. This is a free workshop style slide history talk that I am giving to you, my loyal email subscribers. This is your first quarter bonus for joining me on my history loving adventure. I am going to encourage you, if you like what you see, take a screen grab. I don't mind. I share these slides because I have this information and you guys are helping make my research possible by supporting me through buying books and publications and attending my paid workshops. And this is a way that I can give back for all those years. I know there are people who've been subscribed to my newsletter since it first initially got set up. That was back in back in the days when it was an email list and I had to like cut and paste everyone's names in. 1996 my first email list got started, and so I know that there are 3 people on my list since then, and maybe they'll come today, and if not, thank you, my oldest trustiest subscribers. But thank all of you, whether you've been with me for years or joined me yesterday. I love sharing the history of belly dance. So Alicia has just shared the link to the downloadable PDF. Feel free to download it. If you want to give it to somebody else, feel free. This is a free resource tool that I've given to you that goes along with the talk. It does not replace taking notes. If you want to take notes, feel free to watch it as many times as you like, but I won't be like having it transcribed. So some people have asked me about transcriptions, and I just, there's only so much you can do when you're a one woman shop. Please put questions in the chat box. We'll be going over them later. Just put the word question before your question so it pops out visually as we go. And again, I just want to say thank you for sharing the nerd experience with me. I mean, there are lots of people you can take dance classes with. And, I appreciate you choosing to spend your time and your energy and your learning capabilities, your mental mind palace with me. So without further ado, let's get this party started. So you all know me. I don't think I need to do any major introductions, but I'm just going to say I have been a performing dancer since 1984. I have been a teacher since 91. I did my bachelor's degree in theatrical costume design. I have an associate's degree in fashion design. Boy, that was out of order. Associates in fashion design, bachelor's in theater, and I did a MA in art history and 1 year of an MFA in design. So I have been hardcore on the long time education. I actually am the owner of one of the oldest belly dance websites. www.davina.us started as davina.org back in 1995, and it has been going ever since. And yeah, there are many more things I could say. Author, dancer, costumer, researcher, we're done. Finger symbols define our dance genre. This photograph is taken by our co-hostess Alicia. And I just want to start off with my main platform, which is that belly dancers, every single one of us is an ambassador of the dance. Although this workshop said teaching belly dance history, what it should have been is being an ambassador of belly dance history, because whether you're teaching a class, a formal class, or if you're at a restaurant and somebody asks you a question, you become a teacher. I became a teacher when I was performing at the Renaissance Fair years before I was, probably qualified. And I, didn't have an answer. So for ambassadors of the dance, for teachers of the dance, it's nice to have a set of knowledge nuggets. I think of them as little chunks of information that we can memorize and have at our disposal when somebody asks us a question. So often we find that people are asking questions that we may or may not know the answer to. It happens to me all the time, and I'm a researcher, so I imagine it happens to all of us. And one of the biggest questions ever asked is, how old is belly dance? When did belly dance start? Where does belly dance come from? So I'm about to drop the big news on you that the deepest historical connection we have to our dance ancestors is via our finger symbols, because finger symbols predate um, you know, our knowledge. It's like the oldest knowledge of belly dance. In some locations, it predates language, written language itself. And so, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through a quick sort of historical timeline and talk about the facts, features, and knowledge that can help us share this fact with our adoring public, loyal fans and followers, and our students. So, let's start off with the big question of where does history begin? So history is shaped like a funnel. And all my friends have heard me say this. Yeah, Dawn and her funnel. Don't want to hear about the funnel again, but here's the funnel again. So if you think about history being a collection of data that is in the archive of human history, the database today is massive. We have global access to an ever growing internet full of facts, figures, but also lies and misinformation. So, right now, we have this huge project of having to sift through the information to figure out what's real, what's not, what's important, and what's not. It's a very unmediated, unedited, uncurated world we live in today. And we get pummeled by it, right? And sometimes we even create it ourselves. I am a creator on the internet, so I am part of the noise. But before the internet, if we step back in time, every time there was a communication paradigm shift, meaning that some new form of communication was invented, we have an expansion in the human archive. So you hear me talk about the human culture archive or the human archive or the cultural archive. Those all mean the same thing. It's the collected body of knowledge produced by humans over the course of time. So as we move backwards, there are things that aren't on this list. For instance, the development of the internet. We're going to call that 1990. The internet existed slightly before then, but normal people didn't get onto it until after 1990. Before that, TV. Before that, movies. Before that, the original moving pictures, which dates back to 1893 at the World's Fair, a critical moment in dance history because of the classic Little Egypt, the World's Fair scenarios, being exposed to Oriental dance here in the United States for the first time. But in 1893, that's also a pivotal point when the first moving picture was displayed at the World's Fair. We don't often hear about that as dancers because our world has been curated by our dance moms for us. So I'm expanding the knowledge maybe. In 1826, photography was invented, and although we don't really see dancers in photographic art until the 1850s, it was a paradigm shift where we shifted from illustrations and paintings to the world of photography, which was at the time presumed to be a replication of nature. Of course, we all know that photography can be manipulated to our own nefarious needs, but you can see where I'm going with this. We can jump back into the 15th century, 1440, when the printing press was invented in Europe. I know it was invented in China earlier, but if we go back in 1440, that's when we get printed books. We get the expansion of libraries and of printed material. And with it, the expansion of education in Europe, in the Western world, which is what I'm a part of here in the United States. Oil painting was invented in 1125. Writing as a cultural product, writing was invented deep in the dark ages of history. I said dark ages of history, not in the dark ages. in the Chalcolithic period, which I'm going to be talking about in great detail. So as we look down the funnel, you can see that we go from having every time there's a paradigm shift, the world opens up. But as historians, as we go back, we're actually getting a narrower and smaller body of recorded detailed information until we have singular dots or data points rather than a stream of data. So keep this funnel in mind as I talk about belly dance history, because we're going to go back, 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 back prior to writing in this discussion. So next slide. Cue the next slide. So let's talk about a couple of fast facts. First off, there are three ways that finger cymbals are made. They can be cast, they can be hammered, they can be machined. And they all have the same set of parts. Now I'm going to describe, you can see in this photograph, we have a 2-slot or 1 hole. That is the location through which we attach the finger cymbal. We have the bell, which is the curved or straight shape of the interior of the finger cymbal. We have the rim or bow, which is the bend that goes to the edge, the lip or the edge. I notice the word lip isn't on here, but the flattish edge is also referred to as a lip. These are terms that are used in the world of music to describe all finger cymbals. And these are not finger cymbals, all cymbals. And these are words in English, so you can communicate with people. So when somebody walks up to you in a restaurant and says, what are these? You can say, these are finger cymbals. This is a bell. This is the rim. This is the edge. This is the bow. And I just want to say that recently, just like in the last 2 years, there's been this myth that Turkish cymbals have slots and Egyptian sagat have holes, a single hole. And I just want to debunk that myth right here. In antiquity, all finger cymbals were made with 1 hole. The 1 hole versus 2 hole things is not about culture, it's about technology. And it wasn't until the era of the machine-made finger cymbal, and specifically here in the United States, that we started seeing 2-slotted cymbals. It isn't Turkey, it's the US where that originates. Who was the first manufacturer of finger cymbals with slots? That I haven't found out yet. That is for more research. But we do know that the companies that were featuring it first came out of the United States for AMCAB dancers. If you went to Turkey or you went to Egypt in the 1950s, you would find single hole finger cymbals. And even today, you can go to the Zildjian website today and you can find 2 slots or 1 hole in either thin or thick. They're a Turkish company, relocated, well, if we want to be really specific, they're an Armenian company, relocated from Turkey in the 1920s, making it the oldest family-owned business in the United States. So Zildjian finger cymbals, Zildjian cymbals, me and the fingers, right? Zildjian Cymbals is the oldest American family-owned company. And they are making finger cymbals in both 2 slots and single hole as part of their ongoing product line. Now, in antiquity, there were 7 metals. And when I say antiquity, I'm talking about, let's say 3000 BCE. BCE is before the Common Era. This is replaced BC in, replaced it? Good English, Dawn, yeah. This has replaced the use of BC to make a more culturally inclusive nomenclature for discussing time periods. So in BCE, around 3000, we have the invention of bronze. Now that's the same time in every location. The Bronze Era was this moment of zeitgeist where the human knowledge base grew and expanded and information was exchanged between cultures and between pods of people who had to travel a great distance to share this information. But it seemed to rise up simultaneously in the historic sort of database. The earliest copper smelting works were in Anatolia, in Siberian area, in China. So we're not exactly sure who was the first, but it's kind of irrelevant because it came up, you know, worldwide during the 3rd millennium BCE. So at that time, in great antiquity, there was gold, which was too soft to make any kind of instrument with. There was mercury, which is a liquid at room temperature. There's silver, again, too soft. There is tin, didn't sound good. Tin doesn't sound good. There is lead, again, very soft. There's copper, the first metal to really be effectively smelted from stone and iron. And of course, iron was the last one discovered in the Iron Age, which starts at about 1000 BCE. So, you might hear people go, but what about brass? A lot of our finger cymbals are made from brass. And occasionally you'll find things listed as brass in historic documentation. This is a pair of brass cymbals. But really, what was happening with brass is that zinc, a key ingredient in brass, wasn't expressly mined and smelted. It was an accident of the stones used for the recipe. So we occasionally find ancient brass, but it was a happy accident when it happened. So keep in mind that the Bronze Era is the era when finger cymbals date back to. Right now, we're looking at a finger cymbal that's in a museum collection at the Los Angeles County Museum, and it dates back to the 6th century BCE, very early in the history of man. Now, I'm going to say history of man. I know there's lots of people who are going to be like, oh, let's be inclusive. The history of mankind, people kind, humankind. I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress. So finger cymbals is the English title, the English word or name for these instruments. A lot of people, and I've heard it in person at events, get into discussions. Well, I call them zills, or I call them sagat, or that's a sedatura, or that's a sange, or those are a champar, or mjira. There's many, many, many words for instruments that we put on our fingers and play while we dance. And so here is the real deal. We come from a region. Our dance comes from a wide region. I like to say that in the copper and subsequent bronze eras, our dance was forming already along the eastern edge and across North Africa, into Egypt, along the edge of the Mediterranean. So we're talking about a region that spans from Spain on the northwest all the way around the Mediterranean. As you move out from the Mediterranean, you don't have this commitment to finger cymbals as much as we do right around the edge of the Mediterranean. So we now say manat, and that's more expansive, but we're talking about, again, 3000 BCE, that's 5,000 years ago for those who are doing math. But there are other finger cymbals, the Manjira of India, the Tingsha of Tibet. There are many other hand and finger cymbals that are played in other regions. We, for the purposes of this talk, are focusing on our dance form, which relates to the music forms and the cultures around the Mediterranean. So when somebody says, what are finger cymbals? You can tell them they are a musical instrument that falls into the family called concussive idiophones. That means when you strike them together, their intrinsic property makes their sound. So they ring because they are made of metal that rings. Other concussive idiophone relatives also from the Mediterranean region includes Turkish spoons, which make a lovely kind of ticking noise. We have castanets in Spain, which are also played with the hands. And we have the cracabebs, quercabebs, quackabebs. I've seen many different spellings and I've heard these pronounced many different ways, but these are the Gnawa tribe of Morocco. They play these. These are made of tin and iron, so they don't really ring, but they are a concussive idiophone. And you can see, if you look at those and you compare them to the castanets and you look at the Turkish spoons and you think about our finger cymbals, you can see the relationship of these handheld percussive instruments that are played while dancing. Now, in history, in great antiquity, we don't know what they sounded like, but we do know they exist because they are in collections in museums all over the world. Why don't we see them? Because tiny little finger cymbals are not great for museum purposes. They fall between the cracks. It's hard to build an exhibit around them. And so sometimes you discover them in the weirdest places. On the top left, Alicia took this picture of finger cymbals and she didn't even know she was taking it because the cymbals were in the dark next to these bright white bone clappers. These are from Egypt and date to the Roman era of Egyptian history, which started in the 1st century BCE. Now, we talked about the relatives of finger cymbals, modern cymbals, modern concussive videophones. Here we're looking at historic concussive videophones. We had clappers made out of wood in Anatolia, most of which have not survived, and made of bone in Egypt, many of which did survive due to the specific arid climate. Things survived better in Egypt. We also had on the bottom left the crotale, from the Greek word crotalon or crotala. In Latin, it was known as crotalum. And these instruments were handheld and played while dancing by musicians and dancers in Rome, Greece, Anatolia, Egypt, and across the Levant. All of these Latin regions, this spread with the spread of Greek and Roman culture. So Greek first, then Roman. And of course, Romans played a lot of hand cymbals. So on the top, you see a beautiful Roman era mosaic. This is actually from Pompeii, and this particular mosaic is located in the Archaeology Museum in Naples. And you can see a gentleman dancing and playing. They're all wearing masks, so we know that these are masked entertainers, and he's playing a pair of handheld cymbals. And on the bottom, also from Pompeii, are finger cymbals and sistrum, which is a rattle that came from Egypt, but was really popular in Rome. So there was this definitely an exchange of cultural information and musical instruments. And so these are historic relatives of finger cymbals: clappers, crotali, hand cymbals, and the sistrum. Now, another thing that people ask about when they come up to you and say, hey, tell me about your finger cymbals, how do you keep them clean? What do you do? We all have our little tricks, but I want to share with you some terminology that can help when you're having a discussion with your friends, fans, and followers. So corrosion is the destruction of refined metals into more stable forms. So rust turns into iron oxide. So iron turns into iron oxide in the process called rust. Actually, rust is on this list at the bottom. I'm using one example to describe another. Oxidation is a term that refers to the changes of the surface of a metal, especially when chemicals, and you'll know this if you ever had a necklace turn green from your sweat, or if you have had your finger cymbals turn dark where your fingers touch them. That's the act of oxidation. And it can be oxygen hitting the metal or oxygen working with a third substance to act on the metal. But oxygen is the main player there. Patina is the word that's used to describe this, the green or brownish coating that forms over the surface of metals that contain copper. This is an important one because you and I all have, I'm assuming we all have a set of Zills that is a little green around the edges or maybe a little brown around the edges. That can be called patina as well. Some people love that film. They love that historic, rich look. But if you keep your finger cymbals clean, patina won't form. Also, again, rust, we're back to rust. If your finger cymbals rust, I'm gonna just wager that they probably don't sound like the most super ringy, because iron is not a component of musical grade metal. And I'll get to that next. But if your finger cymbals are rusting, they are probably not great quality finger cymbals because they contain iron. Iron's the only thing that creates rust. So what metals are good finger cymbals made of? So bronze was the first metal and the oldest metal that we have examples of finger cymbals. So bronze was made of tin, which was mined out of the stone cassiterite, which is on the bottom right. Uh, Iron was came out of hematite, godite, magnetite, but malachite and azurite, the two on the bottom left, were what were used to mine copper. So they would dig the stone malachite or azurite out of the earth, and then they would roast it in an oven at high temperatures. Here we have an Egyptian wall painting from Reckmeyer's tomb in Luxor. He was an 18th century vizier, and he actually had lots of workaday, sort of daily activities in his tomb. And from his tomb, we have this beautiful painting of gentlemen engaged in pumping a bellows. So you see the two men on the outer right and left. They are standing on bellows, forcing air into a kiln in order to get it hot enough to melt or roast the stone in order to recover the the, the metal. So we're not sure what metal this is, but it's probably copper. But it could be zinc as well. So here we have ancient Egypt, 18th century, a description of how, a visual shorthand description of how metal was smelted. So the Bronze Era, which is where the era of all the most ancient finger cymbals come from, is between 3000 and 1200 BCE. Again, these dates change depending upon your exact location in the world. And this is where we get cymbal. Now, I'm using this term finger cymbal because it's the English term. Cymbal actually comes to us from ancient Greek for cup or cup shaped. Romans took that word, integrated, the Romans, they took everything, right? So they took that word and turned it into cymbalum in Latin. Old French called it cymbale, and we call it cymbals in our language. So when somebody says, where does our word cymbal come from? This is the origin point for our word cymbal. Of course, I didn't go into the word finger, but you can get the drift that you can say, well, cymbal comes from the word cup. Right, this particular cymbal is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and is dated to the 5th or 4th century BCE and has Greek writing on it. And this was left as a devotional offering at a funerary monument. Okay, here's some modern people who are making, smelting, or in order to make finger cymbals. These three pictures come from the internet, YouTube videos. So these are screen grabs from videos that you can watch today. I will cut and paste some links for you into the replay page. But basically, cymbals start with mining the stone, crushing the stone, smelting. It becomes an alloy when two or more metals are added together. Each cymbal company has its own special blend. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's turned into an ingot. From there, it can either be melted and poured into a sand casting. That's the most traditional way. Or it could be flattened and hammered, which is, sort of the, pre-industrial revolution age method. Nowadays, they are stamped. I had the good fortune of getting to witness finger cymbals being made at the Saroyan factory down in Riverside, California. And here we have, I don't know if you can see my little cursor, this is a die, right? So in the world of tool and die manufacture, which you might have seen, this is a flywheel, old school sort of 70s era equipment that was owned by the Saroyan factory, and Harry Saroyan sat here. This is one of 4 of these that were used, and they would have a series of dies. So this one was used to make the pattern, right? And then there was another one used to press the shape, right? Here's another set here where you can see the shape is made using 2. So the tool is the the big equipment, the flywheel goes, and then it's released after it builds up enough spin, and then it falls down and presses the metal. So modern tool and die manufacture is made from rolls of metal that are punched out and then stamped with a design and shaped. And so here we have that process at the Saroyan factory. Now I'm going to use Saroyan as an example because I use these images here. But today in the modern world, your cymbals are probably made out of one of three different metal compositions. So if you have bronze cymbals, you have a combination of copper and tin. The most popular being B8 or 8% tin. B8 is a music industry standard for bell bronze or cymbal bronze. So you'll hear B8, bell bronze, cymbal bronze, 8% bronze. Those all refer to high quality, high tin content, or excuse me, high copper content. In case you didn't know, what makes finger cymbals ring is the copper content. If your finger cymbals don't ring or they don't ring well enough, it's because they have no or very low copper content. So when we see, you know, those finger cymbals at the costume shop, those are not made with copper, and therefore they don't ring and they sound awful. This is something to share with your students. You're looking for copper content. Brass is copper and zinc. Remember, I told you zinc wasn't really mastered until the 18th century, and that's when we had the development of brass sections in orchestras. And so brass was used to make finger cymbals starting from the 18th century on, the 1700s. And so we have most brass finger cymbals being a combination, somewhat 60-40%, with 40% being zinc and 60% copper. And then, of course, today in our modern world, we have nickel silver, which is also sometimes called German silver, depending upon the manufacturer. And this is a combination of copper, tin, and zinc. So basically, there are three metals here. We have copper and tin in bronze, copper and zinc in brass, copper, tin, and zinc in nickel silver. And just for the record, nickel silver is the softest of these three and will wear out or deform faster. I know some people ask me all the time, can I throw my finger cymbals in the oven and get them to sound better or tuned up? Your oven cannot get hot enough to have any lasting impact on your finger cymbals. Yeah, it just can ruin the surface. You're just opening yourself up to ruining the surface. It won't reshape. You can't, you know, without a tool and die or without heating to, yeah, that's a myth. It's a myth that you can put them in your oven. All right, so bronze finger cymbals are the oldest metal. So, and it's the only metal that's still used in the casting, the traditional casting method. So if you're looking for a real historic sound and a real historic look, bronze finger cymbals made in the casting method is the way. I know of two companies that currently do this that are easy to find. One is the Zildjian company, one is the Sabian company. They're both the Zildjian family. But yeah, they're two branches of the family. Bronze comes in different recipes. So you'll find that the more orange or reddish your finger cymbals are, the higher in copper the alloy or the particular mix. They will corrode faster than brass or white brass or nickel, silver, whatever. These will corrode the fastest, or they'll gain patina the fastest, and they tend to be heavier and larger as well. Brass finger cymbals are the most common right now. Practically every dancer I know owns at least one set of brass finger cymbals. And I know many, and you know who you are, who have entire trays of finger cymbals, boxes of finger cymbals, bags of finger cymbals. Well, you want to make sure that you take good care of these, because brass finger cymbals can scratch pretty well. Like I said before, brass wasn't really discovered as a process until the industrial age, but there are examples that date back thousands of years because of, anecdotal or, flaws in the, like, oh, they threw in a stone that happened to melt down to make the zinc. Brass is most widely available. It's the most affordable for students, and it is the kind of metal that is often the easily faked. So frequently you'll get fake finger cymbals, iron or, other metal tin finger cymbals that don't sound great just for costume purposes only. They will look brass because this is what our modern audience thinks of is the color of finger cymbals. And our third kind is nickel silver, white brass, white copper, German silver, patong, or copper nickel. There are many, many names for this metal blend. And this really was developed in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. This is the newest metal, and it really rose up during the 1820s and is used. This is the same metal that's used to make flutes and piccolos and is the most likely resistant to corrosion. However, it's the softest, so it's most likely to get scratched. They're also lighter, tend to be lighter weight and softer, so they will deform with years of playing. Or unless you're a beast, then it might be months of playing. So just be careful. Have a lighter touch with your silver-toned finger cymbals. So as an ambassador of the dance, going back to my platform that we started with, as an ambassador of the dance, it's good to know what finger cymbals you like to use by brand so that you can tell your students, hey, I use these. The second thing I also recommend to ambassador of the dance is that you know what the metal content of what you're playing is. So if somebody really likes your bronze zills and yours will sound different than everyone else's. Why? Well, they're bronze and it's not the most common metal. When you're working with students, it's nice to have a variety of price points available for different budgets, maybe even lengths. And, as an instructor, if you actually have students, reach out to your favorite zill manufacturer or dealer and ask for a discount for your students. Most of them will work with instructors in order to create package deals because they want to get instruments in the hands of students. In other words, they want to get people hooked. So definitely have that information available. And we live in an era of the Zoom, so have links available. I play Saroyans. I share a link to Saroyans. If I play with my Zildjians, I share a link to the Zildjians. It gives you authority as an instructor. It adds authority to your voice when you have these links available. So know the metal, know the manufacturer, and choose to wear readily available finger cymbals when you are performing in public and with your students so that you can help them manifest their dreams. Because if you're playing, oh, I got these zills from my dance mama, these were picked up in Turkey on a trip to Istanbul in 1972, that won't help your student find a set of zills that they really enjoy. So for instance, if you like Turquoise International and you play those instead of choosing your vintage wonderful Mama Jammas, you'll be able to say, hey, students, you can get these today. Here's the information. So wear and play instruments that when around students or educating the public, you can get these and it will make you appear generous. It'll give you authority. Everyone will love it. Okay. Now, want to play all your Mama Jammas, all your vintage ones? Host a Zill party. You can do this via Zoom and you can say, okay, on February 23rd, I am going to play every single pair of finger cymbals I own. Here's the first one. Tell the story, share the knowledge, but do it in a way that puts it into a context where people aren't going, oh, I can't get a pair. You know what I mean? Sorry about the wine. Wine sounds good. Anyways, so know that throughout the history of, finger cymbals, we have documentation in the form of surviving instruments from the 3000 BCE. And over time, they make more and more appearances going back to the funnel of history, when we get to the time of painting and illustrations, we start seeing dancers and subsequently their finger symbols appearing in art. And so, as an educator in the world of dance, we often see these images disconnected from their facts. You know, like you get onto Pinterest and you go, "Oh, Turkish dancer with sills." Oh, I love that. So, try as an educator or an ambassador of the dance, if you're sharing an image, to know what the image source is, because you'll be able to help your next generation find this information easier than maybe we did back before the internet. If you're as old as me, over 50, you can help the new seekers of knowledge with their search by sharing the name, title, and location of the illustration. For instance, on the left, we have the mores, usages, and costumes of the Ottomans, an abridged history. And this was written in French, and it's by Antoine Laurent Castellan, written in 1812. This particular illustration was replicated all throughout the 19th century. And so you'll see the dancer on the left is reproduced in different colors, appears to be drawn by different people because she was. But this is the source. This is the source for Turkish dancing from this original book, and subsequent versions come back. Now, those subsequent versions don't necessarily tell you what the original source is. So if you can find these original sources, share them with your students so that they can then become more knowledgeable with real authentic knowledge, rather than, oh yeah, you know, it was played in Turkey. We have pictures that date back to the early 19th century. This is much more detailed and factual information. We also have the picture on the right is a detail of a dancing girl by Mohammed Bakr from 1778 CE. So now we're going back about 25 years. We're now in a different country. This is Persian. This is a wall painting from Persian from the late Zand period. And so we frequently will see these Persian illustrations, but we won't necessarily know who the artist is, or we won't know when the date, because sometimes we'll see the date 1192. 1192 is the date in the Arabic calendar, really 1778 in our 1778 CE in the Western calendar. So know the dates, know the titles, know the locations and where they come from. And also keep in mind that finger symbols aren't just about the metal. Before the invention of the modern elastic bands, dancers had the challenge of tying on strings with lace, with twine, with leather thongs, and very early on with metal rings, that they would put their fingers through a metal ring. On our left, we have a painting by, it's undated, called Reverie by Jean-Francois Portal. He was a Belgian painter who worked in the 1870s to the 1890s. And we have this lovely painting. And if you zoom in right above her tambourine, you can see her finger symbols with their ties, and you can see the knot and the two little strings. So you can see that, you know, this predates the development of elastic in, you know, during the Industrial Revolution. Elastic really got its start in the 1840s. That number I don't have off the top of my head. Something for me to look up. On our right, we have Young Egyptian Girl from 1869 by Emile Vernet-Lecomte, a French painter working in the middle of the 19th century till the end, till 1900. He was part of this Orientalist movement. And I just said something wrong. The Orientalist movement is not a thing. What we have is different painting styles, right? So this is a realist painting style of an imaginary Oriental theme. Orientalism is a theme in art. It wasn't a movement in art, meaning all those artists were not working together to create, you know, with a manifesto to create a school. What they were people responding to the desire from the public to have these themes. So this particular painter also painted portraits and other things. He wasn't strictly an Orientalist painter. But know the dates. Elastic dates to the middle of the 19th century. And we have firsthand documentation of dancers, especially in Egypt in the 19th century. Again, we're talking about printing presses here. In the 19th century, we have William Henry Bartlett's The Nile Boat, or Glimpses of the Land of Egypt, from 1851. On the left, that's page 113 of that book. And on our right, we have Henry Clay Fish's Bible Lands Illustrated, a pictorial handbook of the antiquities and modern life of all the sacred countries, dating to 1876. And here we have illustrations that were drawn to accompany the description of dancers in the text. And so this kind of work is what I'm focused on right now, which is finding illustrations from firsthand depictions of travelers, of dancers performing. And so this is where my current archival work is located. After, talking about that paradigm shift, after photography was invented, we have 150, nearly 200 years now of photography to pull from. And so we have, many more illustrations. This picture from 1858 is called Pasha and Bayadere. This is located in many places, but the Getty has a copy of this picture. And the photographer has staged this. This picture was taken in London. And if you look really closely at a good quality reproduction, her hands are being supported by strings, because in 1856, you had to clamp people into position in order to get a photograph. These additional two pictures in the center, 1893, this is a postcard, and in 1910, again, another postcard, but you can see the quality of reproductions improving over time, and more people drawn to the Middle East with the speeding up of transportation due to steam engines, steam-powered shipping, trains. People could get there. And of course, the next paradigm shift is video, movies. This is a video clip of Fatima's Coochie Coochie dance, also known as muzzle dance. This was recorded by Thomas Alva Edison in his Black Maria studio from 1896. This particular video is available in many places on YouTube. You can check it out, but why I have included a screen grab here, as you can see, she is playing finger cymbals. Although this is a silent video or silent movie, you can see that finger cymbals were important to our dance. So important, they were included in early videos. And of course, as mentors, it is our job when we're teaching cymbals to define finger cymbals for us and for our students. So set up expectations that it takes a long time to really master finger cymbal playing, that you need to get that mind-body coordination of moving and playing going. Add cymbals to your work, your warm-ups. Make them easy and affordable to purchase by giving your students links. Guide your students with other recommendations for watching videos, especially on YouTube and Facebook and other places. Ask them to check in with you, do some mentoring to help them out, and encourage student use of finger cymbals by integrating them into student choreographies. And, in this day of COVID, it's really hard to use finger cymbals on Zoom. So get some button or some wooden finger cymbals so that you can get the mind-body connection without the sustained ring. Pets and people wearing hearing aids stand finger cymbals, so just know that they're hard to practice at home. And then put your information in sound bites. Think hammer and anvil. Your thumb is the anvil, your finger is the hammer and anvil. It's better to be clean and open than filled and off. People who try to really embellish their patterns, it's better to play cleanly with an open pattern than to fill it with off triplets. Plan your accents with your music. Know your music. When in doubt, step down. So if you feel like you are losing your Zill mojo, take a break, stop playing, keep dancing, keep enjoying yourself, keep the audience entertained. But the audience will be grateful if you choose rather than forcing awkward playing. And of course, friends, don't let friends play cheap finger cymbals, right? Maybe this should be the title of this workshop. But anyways, that is it. We have reached the end. So here we are. I am the author of this book, Zill's Music on Your Fingertips. Here's your commercial. Thanks for buying my book. And let's open the world up to questions. All right, so if you want to unmute yourself to ask a question, what we're going to do is Alicia's going to go down this and read them out loud, and then we'll figure this out. All right. Did you guys enjoy that talk? Write in the comments if you thought this talk was good. I see some thumbs up. I see some thumbs up. All right, Alicia.
Okay, so there are a couple questions that sort of tie into the most recent slides. The Persian picture, the close-up of the dancer, there was a question about, would wearing Zill on the bottom of the middle finger, is that common or is that just a depiction?
All right, so now we're talking about artists and reproducing what they see. So what an artist does is they recreate their observations. And so this may be part of an artist not really getting close enough to a dancer to really see where it's worn, right? Remember, this is the age before photography. So they didn't have an image source. They would do a sketch, but especially in these Persian images, the question is would the artist have had access to actual dancing girls? Culturally, that would have been inappropriate. So I think that an artist is working from something seen in a blur during a performance and maybe in passing, and then in the workshop, so don't take that as literal. We often see Turkish illustrations where it's on the index finger and the thumb. And again, that is more about the artist's failings as an observer. This is just the way it works. We can't see finger cymbals ablazing from a distance at a show. And so we have to think about, the artist's limitations. So finger cymbals were played. This is a document that says finger cymbals were played, but we don't know what the rhythms were. We don't know what the patterns were. And we really don't know exactly how dancers wore them. We just have an artistic impression, but that's a great question.
A couple more questions asked about the painters that you presented and some of the book plates. So there was questions about the names of these painters or including the names and authors of the books with those illustrations. Do you have those somewhere?
Yeah, so I read them off in the talk. But yes, I have all that identification information. So if you go back and, in the replay, if you listen, you can hear the exact name. Where I know the information, I've shared all the information I have.
All right. One of the first questions at the beginning of your presentation is there's a question about, it seems that cymbal work has diminished in the last decades. So what is the popularity or status of cymbal work today among dancers?
So in my neighborhood, it's pretty good. I think this is about where you're located, the style you're looking at. I mean, I'm located in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I have a lot of friends who are dancing in more fusion and tribal styles and always wear finger cymbals. I have dancers who dance at nightclubs professionally and always wear finger cymbals. But then if I go to a belly dance social gathering, not that that's happened in the last year, but if I were to go to a gathering, I would say there would only be about 70%. Honestly, I don't play finger cymbals anymore when I dance because, my fingers are tired. But I know that there are people who always commit to cymbals and people who don't. But think of it this way. This is part of our history and our most ancient history. We don't know what ancient dancers look like, kind of know what they sounded like. We know what a 3-inch diameter bronze Zill sounds like. And so it is our deepest connection. And so it behooves us as educators and ambassadors of the dance to share the information that we have. That isn't a call to dance every dance with finger cymbals, but I would encourage everybody to get their ZIL work going. And there are some dancers out here on the internet who are teaching great courses. The first person I think of is Sahira from Texas. She has a great ZIL course you might want to check out. But I think that it varies from place to place, from style to style, and from dancer to dancer, whether they will choose to wear finger cymbals or not.
Okay, there was an inquiry that you apparently addressed during your talk, but I do want to just mention. So the inquiry is about the paper that comes with Saroyan cymbals. Says that the Greek word for finger cymbals is Cymbala, but your book expands on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think the Greek is Cymbalon.
Yeah.
And then you sort of address that. So it
yeah.
may not been more of a question than that, but it was just of inquiring.
Well, and this is about research. Those little leaflets that are in the Saroyan packaging were developed years and years ago. And we're in an era, like I said, the global knowledge base of the universe with the internet. So we can learn more and know more and go deeper. But yes, our word cymbal does come from through Old French into Latin into Greek.
Another question specifically about Saroyan's catalog of cymbals. Christina asked, I'm Greek, so I'm curious, is there a cultural reason why Grecians are the lowest pitch in Saroyan's catalog? So I don't know if you know enough about all the different cymbals.
So I'm not a Saroyan rep. However, I asked Terry many years ago about this, and they named their cymbals based on their appearance. So the tone and the quality and everything, they were named like people name shoes or cars. This is this is a historic cymbal we got from Turkey. Let's replicate it. That becomes our Turkish one. But that doesn't represent a whole country or culture. It's just representing one. They had several different makes and models, and the design work is what led the names. So, they have Christmas ZILs. Did you know that Saroyan made Christmas ZILs? Yeah, they have with a Christmas pattern. I think they have 2 different Christmas ZILs. So don't take one manufacturer's naming convention as a relationship to his history styling. That said, I just shared a blog post where there are Greek finger cymbals, ancient Egyptian finger cymbals in a Greek archaeology museum. So, you get these these crossovers in culture, even in antiquity. So, this people move, people share, and people change. And the Phoenicians, which I didn't mention in this talk, but the Phoenicians really spread this use of moving with handheld instruments around the Mediterranean. And the Phoenicians are predate Roman culture, and we're roughly operating at the same time the ancient Greeks were, earlier in the Greek period. And so the Phoenicians really took stuff around. And so I've always been, it's like, hey, Harry, and I know Harry's gone and a new team family owns it, Saroyan manufacturing. But it's like, hey, Harry, when are you going to make Phoenicians? I used to tease him. When are you going to make Phoenicians? So weird question. Not a weird question. Good question. Weird answer.
Nice little aside there. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's a question about if dancers take up an instrument separately later, is it more likely to be percussion? And with that, if musicians take up dance later, is it more likely to be social? And I don't know.
Well, so now that's a question of individual people. And it's one of those things where I encourage, so I've got 2 generations of dance students underneath me. behind me, below me, above me. Anyways, I have two generations of students who are teachers now. And I always encourage them to make it integrated from day one because it's harder to learn to add something onto your dance because it takes time to get things into muscle memory. And then you have to retrain your entire muscle memory once you add finger cymbals. So it's easier if you learn it from the beginning as part of the dance culture, the culture of dance. Now, this is where I'm going to theorize. Here's my little soapbox. I'm about to step onto my soapbox. I really feel that there was a break in the early aughts with the belly dance superstars and everybody wanting to learn super fast. With the rise of the internet, super fast learning, finger cymbals were kind of left by the wayside. And so we've now had a knowledge break, right? You know, those early aughts. So before the aughts, everybody learned to play finger cymbals, but then dancers would choose whether they would play them or not based on their skill level, whether they were with a live band, whether it was, canned music. And then somehow in that process of speeding up dance education, finger cymbals were left aside because they were too hard, meaning it took too long to become competent with them, easy to leave them off. We have generations of instructors now who are teaching without finger cymbals because as students, they didn't learn with finger cymbals. That's my soapbox. That's all theory, guys. That is not history. That is theory. So.
I do want to just tag on to that. Mike had given a lovely quote from a jazz museum that was from Duke Ellington, how he wanted his musicians to dance swing to understand who they were playing for. So
yes.
I think that sort of ties in also to what we find in our dance.
Great quote. Great
Mm-hmm.
quote. And and it's we all make choices. What style do we dance in? How much makeup we wear? What costumes we wear? Do we play finger cymbals or not? It's all about personal choice. At the end of the day, we craft our dance experience by our choices. And so the choice, do I play zills or do I not? Do I call them zills? Do I call them sagat? Am I going to wear brass? Am I going to wear bronze? Do I even know what these finger cymbals are made of? All those kinds of questions is going to be completely unique to every single performer. So we have 5 minutes left. Are we?
Okay. Question about the relationship between the gauge and tone of the cymbals. Is that mostly the thickness and thinness, or is it also affected by medical combinations?
Yes, and yes. So the higher the copper content in the metal alloy, the higher and more sustained the ring will be. So bronze finger cymbals, and I'm not at home. I apologize. I'm down on an family emergency. But if I had a bronze finger cymbal and I go ding, that would have a sustain that's more longer. That's longer than its brass counterpart. That's because of the intrinsic alloy metal. If comparing bronze thin and bronze thick will have a deeper tone, right? And I know this from practical experience. Zildjian makes this easy. They have the exact same finger cymbals available in thick and thin, and you can compare them if you have access to both sets. You'll find that the thick ones have a lower, throatier voice. So it'll ring in a different pitch than higher ones. Smaller diameter, higher in pitch. Brass, higher in pitch. White metal is an even higher tinkling sort of sound because the copper level is a little bit lower, and you've got this addition of the tin and the zinc working together really pushes the tone up. So thickness, when you're comparing apples to apples, meaning bronze to bronze, the thickness does matter. So that and I would extrapolate that out to everything else. But again, I'm not fronting Soroyan, but you can sometimes get the same set of zills in different metal compositions, and you will hear the same shape, the same sound, the same thickness, different tones because of the alloy of the metal. I don't know if I answered that question.
No, I think you totally did. So There is a question about, for those of us wanting to do more research about the history of finger cymbals and dance, what advice do you have? How to start their research? What do
So,
you recommend?
so buy my book. No, no, just kidding. No, no, really, buy my book. Thanks. But so start with a good bibliography, because the history of finger cymbals is now into the archival stage, right? So the surface stuff is out there, right? So identify your surface stuff. So go through every historic picture of finger cymbals you have and get the information about that's kind of where I'm at right now, is identifying all these images that have floated around the belly dance world and are on Pinterest and people use, and trying to correctly identify where they come from. I'm in the process of going through travel logs, 19th century travel logs, looking for those images within the pages that haven't been scanned and reached the light of day within our belly dance community. And so finding that original documentation that hasn't been shared yet is where I'm at in my research. But for a new scholar of dance, you might go, okay, well, and all right, so here I go with terminology. I'm a secondary source. So if you buy my book, you get a huge bibliography where I list all the books and steps that I took in my historical digging. If you go to one of those primary sources, let's say it's a book, let's say it's a travelogue, that is your primary source. I'm the secondary source. So for historians, new historians, find the reliable secondary sources first, then go to their bibliographies and follow the research deep down the hole. So if you go, okay, hey, I want to learn about Persian finger cymbals, you track it down and go down that hole. Hey, there's Persian miniatures. Hey, there's Persian wall paintings. Hey, there's this. Hey, there's that. You go to museum archives and you look at Persian art that may not be part of the belly dance bubble of information, and you expand outside of it to see what's been missed by other past belly dance researchers. I am a secondary research, but it's a great jumping off point because I've included a big bibliography. There are other ZIL books out there. There are a whole lot of them in the late 70s, early 80s. Jamila Salimpour made some. Many people, especially in my area, oddly, there were a lot of ZIL instructional books that came out of the Bay Area during that era. They didn't include bibliographies because history was just, oh, this is a mother goddess dance. Oh, we're dancing to celebrate birth in the womb. There was a whole different attitude. Nowadays, people want authentic information. They want quality information, and they want their information based on fact, not myth. And so start with those secondary sources like my book and move back. The Zildjian Company has a really nice book on the history of the company. So there's a Zildjian book out there, and there are many books on instruments. My next depth dive into the archive is going to be looking at 19th century musical indexes or dictionaries, or these informational sources that were made for kids that included finger cymbals in them. These are the instruments of Egypt. Why, look, there's some sagat. Look at that. So that's where I'm going next with my research.
Last thing is just to everybody know that I put up the link to the bonus content that is on Dawn's website. And Dawn, if you can speak to where this recording will be, so we missed the beginning, so you can just address that.
Yes. Okay, so if you follow the link that Alicia put at the beginning of the talk, can you share it again right now, Alicia?
I did. I just shared it a couple minutes.
So that link has the handout, which has a timeline of ZIL history. I didn't really go into that timeline in depth. It has other information about terminology, soundbite history. It's got a lot of stuff. Feel free to take any of that information. I'm sharing it with you freely. I'm going to place this talk onto that page. So this talk, I'm going to edit the end. I'm going to edit that end. I'm going to put it together with a little introduction. I'm probably going to get out my finger cymbals and play some rings, tones, just so you guys can get a sense, because I know that's one of the things I had planned on doing and I couldn't. But that will be on that page. Next month, when I send out the Studio Divina newsletter, probably around the 15th of February, I will include a link again to that same page, and that video will be embedded. It will be a private YouTube video that will only be accessible through that page.
Will the link to this talk be ready in like a week or a little bit longer?
I am out of town currently. It won't be ready until after I get back. So it will be not this coming week, but the following week. Yeah. I'm unfortunately out of town caring for my mom who had some surgery. So it's a family emergency. Thank you for your patience with me. This isn't the workshop I entirely envisioned, but we're doing okay.
That's it.
Okay, well, I just want to thank all of you for coming tonight and for giving me an hour and 15 minutes of your precious time. I promised 45 minutes and it went an hour. So I apologize for going too long. If you have specific questions about teaching finger cymbal history and you would like more information, again, I'm going to say buy my book, Zill's Music on Your Fingertips. It's available for my Etsy store as digital and print or on Amazon.com. If you are around the world, it's better to buy it from Amazon. They will print it locally and ship it to you locally rather than ordering it directly from me. Either way, I'm, you know, there are other books on finger cymbals, but not many. And, you know, it just hasn't been an area in the belly dance world that has been heavily researched. And most of the ones I've found have been from the late 70s. I think there's been one other book, but I don't have my shelf here to pull it, right? But I will include it. I will include it on that page with information. I'm going to include a whole bunch of links. There are going to be a multitude of links on that page when I get home, get this video edited, get it embedded, and then I'll include a bunch of links that I mentioned here, and I'm happy to share. All right.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you guys. And like I said, I really, really value your support in my ongoing research. I am open for suggestions to what the other 3 free talks are going to be. You know the areas I research. If you follow me on Facebook, you know for sure what I'm doing. In February, I'm doing a talk with Maheen. She's sponsoring a kiss and tell all slideshow about Necla Ates, 1950s era. She was the Turkish delight on the cover of numerous belly dance themed, you know, those Fox Oriental Fox Trot albums that were so popular. And so I'll be tracing her career, the good, the bad, and the lascivious. And so that will be in the end of February. So my theme for February on Facebook is going to be the fabulous 50s, and my talk will be on Necla Ates. So thank you for supporting me in everything that I do. I really appreciate you. And I'm always open to discussion, and you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And of course, divina.us. Thank you. Thanks everyone. All right. Have a great evening.